Hello, we're back. And today we're going to do another mini tribute to Dr. John McDougall because that just seems appropriate now, doesn't it? It's been now, I think, almost 2 weeks. It's been exactly 2 weeks since we've heard of the unfortunate and, too early passing of Dr. McDougall. So last week I shared some tips, kind of like the, too long didn't read version, my interpretation of his potato mastermind in honor of the good doctor. And today I'm going to quickly review some of the coolest things I pulled out from his part 2 mastermind. Now, I'm going to go through that. I'm going to share a personal story of that I have of John, and then I'm going to end off with a call to action for all of us because I think for everybody who admires his work, who's learned and gained empowerment, has changed their lifestyle, maybe affected their families in amazing ways, we want to help and we want to give back. And the way that we can do that is just to share this good news and just share it with anybody who will listen. And John used to always say, like, everybody's got a talent. So whether you're a corporate executive, you have all this power over people, you can influence them. Whether you're a YouTuber, whether you are a songwriter or an artist or you knit, I don't know, there's always an opportunity to spread a message. And people who really have changed their lives and their health states and actually understand that feeling of what it felt like before and after, realizing the starch solution and embedding that into our lives, we understand the power of this. Okay, so I want to just thank everybody for their comments from the last live. I was kind of blown away by how much that video picked up and how many of you guys contributed with your comments. And it was like really touching. And I just have to say, it feels very warming that the internet could be used for so many good things, such as like this, whoever is affected by his passing and by his life and by his teachings and his work, we are all mourning together. And, not a lot of people in my personal life know who John McDougall is and understand how much he has given us. So in order to be able to mourn with others, even perfect strangers online, like we know, we understand. And so it's been really nice. So thank you for that. Let's kick it off with some practical information that John had shared about the potato. Yeah, it's all about the potato. Of course, they'll say like, just pick starch. And that's truly been like just a mind-blowing realization. I got certified in plant-based nutrition over 10 years ago and learned so much. But you know what was not drilled into my head? Even after getting certified by 2 certifications, being just like personally very interested in this topic, learning as much as I can, experimenting, and just exposing myself, just diving into this plant-based world, I didn't really understand that the core of our meals must be a starch. Because if we don't have that starch, we're not going to get enough calories and we're going to end up being kind of miserable. We got to satiate that hunger. So it's all about the starch. Anyway, so John in his mastermind shows an example of a baked potato versus a regular potato, about 100 grams of each. I got to change my settings on the thing. So he'll say that the calories for a baked potato is 174. This is a baked potato with bacon and cheese. So we're missing this. So let's just say this is a guesstimate versus a regular potato that's been cooked. Like, let's say it's just been boiled or it's been steamed. It's 87 calories. So to me, that's not like a really significant difference because 174 calories to me is really not that much for a baked potato. I would have assumed that would be a lot more in calories. Now, when it comes to the fat, though, 8.9 grams of fat for the baked potato with bacon and cheese versus just 0.1. This is the part where if you are not a McDougall or a starchivore, whatever you want to call yourself, this is what's going to blow your mind. A potato has virtually no fat versus We eat it the normal, delicious way, and we're getting almost 9 grams of fat. Now, that's just in one baked potato. So we're going to eat more things throughout the day. So in a day's time, how much fat are we consuming? I don't know. But this is how the weight starts creeping up. So I've had lots of conversations just even during our summer break from, with people, and sometimes they just don't understand why the weight is getting packed on and why it won't come off. We got to pay attention to our food. Cholesterol. With the bacon and cheese, of course, it's 22 milligrams of cholesterol versus 0 in the humble potato. Why? Because cholesterol is only made by animals, and we actually naturally make as all the cholesterol that we need. So we do not need to consume it. It's not a necessary or an essential nutrient. Essential nutrients are called essential because we must consume it in order to get it. The body doesn't make it on its own. Sodium, mind-blowing, 591 milligrams of sodium in the baked potato with the bacon and cheese versus 4 milligrams of sodium in the regular potato, steamed or boiled. So this is also a key learning because a lot of people have high blood pressure. A lot of people have been told by their doctors, like, lower the sodium in your food. So immediately we think of the sodium or the salt that we just sprinkle on our food. And we'll say, I don't cook with sodium. I don't do anything to flavor my food. And that's not really necessarily going to help. We have to understand our food again. So a lot of people who have high sodium in their diets, they probably eat a lot of processed food. If you look at the sodium content in processed food, you will be amazed at how high that number is, typically in the thousands. But the sodium is coming from the bacon. Bacon is very salty. Cheese is very salty. Is it delicious? Yes, but very salty. We're just understanding where our sodium is coming from. Glycemic index is another thing that John touches on because it's just such a hot topic. And even many doctors will say you should eat low on the glycemic index, like low glycemic index foods. We eat something, our blood sugar goes up. Every time we eat something, John says, our blood sugar will go up. That's what happens. That's what it's supposed to do. But when we look at these numbers, and the glycemic index of potatoes is 120 versus white bread 100 versus a Snickers chocolate bar 67. His point being the glycemic index of a food is just one quality and one component of a food. And we can't make these wild statements about a food type or a food group just based on their glycemic index. So yeah, I thought that was very interesting how he phrases that. And so he says it's just one quality of food. There's other qualities like fiber, the carbs, the protein, the fats, all the other nutrients that are in the food. So the calories, it's not just glycemic index. So you wouldn't give yourself a food prescription based on just fat content, right? You're going to take into account everything else that food contains. So that was his point. He literally says you can't take one element of food and make a judgment on how that food will affect your health. Mastering Diabetes, those guys are amazing. And I heard that, what's his name? I think his name is Cyrus. And he puts it the best way. He says that glycemic index and your blood sugar will elevate every time we eat food. He says that then once it normalizes, if your blood sugar normalizes within a 4-hour period, then you're probably okay. If it doesn't normalize, then you've got some insulin insensitivity, right? i.e., like maybe your insulin is not working properly and therefore your body is out of whack. But just honing in on the GI is not the thing that we should be doing. John mentions acrylamides, do they cause cancer? He says that he couldn't find one study that involved humans and that correlation between consuming acrylamides, which potatoes can produce when cooked at very high temperatures. But he says that all the studies that he could find are based on rodents. Now, yeah, when we study with rodents, it's like the first step before we test on humans, right? The scientists are trying to be responsible people. But given rodents have a lot of similarities with humans, apparently, that's why they're a good, I guess, thing to test on. But Many times, a lot of people will say many times, you can't actually just test on rodents and assume that that's the same thing that's going to happen with humans, because of course we are completely different. Similarities, yes. Hints, absolutely. Maybe some leads, yes, but very different from humans. So we can never assume just because something happens with one animal, it's going to happen with this animal. With the glycemic or acrylamides, John says that cooking temperatures above 120 centigrade or 248 degrees Fahrenheit will form acrylamides. So acrylamides have been shown to create DNA damage in rodents. So he says if we boil them, the temperature only goes to 212 Fahrenheit, or if we steam them, same, 212. On his little chart in that part 2 mastermind of his potato talk, he shows that if we pressure cook them, it's a little too hot. So it will and can form acrylamides. Boo! My favorite and easiest way to make mashed potatoes, especially for like a big gathering, is just to throw a bunch of potatoes in a pressure cooker in my crock pot, or not a crock pot, my Instant Pot. And that makes it so creamy. I don't need to add any kind of like milk or cream. I just use water. Yeah. And I just like season it with salt and whatever. And it's so good. And it's so creamy. Anyway, okay. So boil and steam them. There you go. When it comes to the skins, he says, basically, if you want to eat the skins, you can. You don't have to. You're not missing out on anything. There's a lot of nutrients in the meat of the potato. So that's what we want to get at. And then lastly, nightshades. There's taters, tomatoes, eggplants, and bell peppers. And some people with arthritis may avoid nightshades because of all this stuff that we see online. Is it true? John says he has never had a patient come to him and say that they cut out nightshades and their arthritis got better. So that is maybe a bogus thing. All right, so those are basically his teachings. Of course, he goes really into climate, and I'm not really going to talk about that a lot because I am just a total noob when it comes to climate change and all that stuff. But of course, I think by now we all know that raising animals for human food takes up a lot of land. It takes up tons of water resources. A lot of people will say, yeah, but it's you like vegetarians that are like taking up all the water and killing all these insects and blah, 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 because of all this like corn and soy that we grow. A lot of that is to feed the animals that we then eat, right? So I think if we open up our minds a little bit and really kind of like take in all the information, then that might make a lot of sense. Some cool fun facts about the potato. 1 billion people eat potatoes as a staple food today, which is insane. But not surprising, right? Especially if you've seen John's map of the world and he shows like the starchy civilizations of our day. And he kind of breaks down like, you know, in North America, we ate this starch. In South America, we ate that starch. And, you know, the breadbasket of the world in the Middle East. We ate a lot of starch. Yes. The potatoes are the third most important food crop in the world. I try to see like what's number 1 and 2. It's wheat, rice, a bunch of different grains, maybe corn. Potatoes can be grown on any elevation. So whether it's on a mountaintop or like sea level, water levels, it can be grown anywhere. So, and it's also apparently really easy to grow potatoes. You just dig a hole in the ground and you plant literally a potato. You don't even need the seeds and they will just start growing. Like that's insane. And then you just dig them up and they apparently mature in like 50 days, something like that. That's insane. It requires very little water to grow potatoes. If we store them in a cool, dry, well-ventilated place, they can last up to 10 years or more. Like what? 1 acre of potatoes feeds 10 people for an entire year. And potatoes are produced in 130 different nations today. Taters, there are 4,300 different varieties of potatoes. Potatoes are prolific, right? Just like John. In the last slides, he jokes and he calls all the different food groups or like, are you an earthitarian? Are you a starchivore? Or like just all these funny sayings, right? Flexitarian. I used to call myself a flexitarian, and I would get a laugh every single time because it is pretty funny. But he says that we should be planetarians, and that is an actual term. So a planetarium is if you are a planetarian, you are eating for the benefit of the planet. So you're eating in a way that is a lesser load on planet Earth. So less water usage, less land usage. Definitely when I see footage of like Amazon forests and these like lungs of the earth being just stripped down for, the free roaming cattle. I want to pretend that that's like not real and it's just like an AI generated image, but I think it's real. He says do 50%. So a lot of people are starchivores or hardcore vegans, and it's really easy for you because, maybe you've been following John McDougall since the 70s or something, since he's been in Hawaii or something like that. But he knows that a lot of people just can't get on board entirely. So he says, just do 50%. I mean, 100% is better, but just do 50%. I find that when I'm like 90% there, that's personally my sweet spot. I'd like to hit the system with some junk food every once in a while, because in my experience, when I have just gone completely strict to the point where like I wouldn't even chew gum because I was like, there's weird chemicals in that thing. So there was a period of time, about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years, where I was so strict. I will admit I had never felt better and I never looked better. And it was kind of good because that's when we got pregnant and had our daughter. But I find that when I'm like that, when I went to travel and I had a little bit of beer, I had a little bit of this, I had a little bit of cheese, I did my best traveling. But it's not that easy to get whole food, plant-based food back in the day. Now it's obviously so much easier, but not perfectly easy. But anyway, when I consumed a little bit of that stuff, then my body just broke down. I was like so clogged up, and my entire trip, we went to London and Paris, my entire trip, I just felt awful. I don't know that I had ever felt so terrible in my life. Woo! And flying, getting up to that elevation and coming down, it hurt. So I kind of understand now what people with sinus issues feel, because woo, that was painful. So after that experience, I thought, you know what? I think I do need a hit to the system every once in a while to just kind of like normalize my body and not be so sensitive. So personally, that's my jam. It's like 90%, a bunch of whole plants, ideally, and then 10% just whatever. Name your favorite junk food. Anyway, so I like that he says do 50% or do 60, 70, 80, 90. Like, we have to experiment with ourselves. One of the other things that I have loved when John said was we have to make sure that the healing outweighs the damage. So I always like picture these scales, right? Like, is the damage worse than the whole plants that I'm consuming right now? And maybe that's why I am getting a weird ache in my knee, let's say, for example. But just making sure that the good outweighs the bad is a really interesting way of thinking of things. So thank you, John, again. Quick story about John. And last week, thank God I had those little cards, because I started to get really emotional and I was able to cover the camera with the cards. And yeah, so that was nice, because there's no crying on YouTube for me. I just don't want to do that. I'm an ugly crier. Some people look really cute. That ain't me. But when I first met John and we started to work together, I kind of just like assumed that maybe he might turn into a raging a-hole. And so I was very hesitant on getting to know him. I didn't want to get close to him. I didn't really want to see behind the curtain, because that would really disappoint me if he turned out to be a jerk. So I always sort of had that hesitation. But so I met him in 2019 at a Veg Fest in Orange County. I've had so many email exchanges, and after learning of his passing, I looked back and I looked at our email exchanges, and it was very sad, but it was also very happy because he was a really happy man, and he was a very passionate man, and that passion like shone through in every single email exchange. We worked on a lot of presentations together, so I helped him just kind of like clean things up a little bit. And he was always really gracious. I loved, of course, his notes where he was very appreciative of my contribution. That always just made me feel very nice that he was just so happy about it. And he said that it made presenting his lectures a lot more fun, which you've got to love hearing that. And a lot of people, in the comments last week from last week's video, some people said, or a couple of people, at least one person said, thank you for speaking about him in a kind way. And that kind of makes me sad. I think that you said that because you see people who don't speak of him in a kind way. And I kind of understand, right? Like some people are not fans of his. Some people complain like, I don't like being yelled at. He's not yelling, he's passionate. But I understand where you're coming from. Some people think he might be like egotistical. I mean, come on, we're all humans and we all have an ego, all right? Maybe he's just a little bit honest about his. But I want to tell you that he was always very nice and he was just so consistent. Like the man that we see online is a man that he is. And I just felt a lot of, I was very pleased to see that. So my initial assumption that he might turn into, might be a real jerk in real life was not true. So hooray. So when I hear people say how much they loved him, I think because of his prolific work, because there's so much of him that's online and we've consumed so much of his brain and how his mind works, we know him for who he is. Those who do have love for him, we know him for who he is because he showed himself. He was just the real deal. And for anybody who poo-poos him, they don't really know him the way that we might. I've had the absolute honor and privilege to sit in on a lot of McDougall programs. So they run this online program to get people off their meds, to basically start healing their bodies, even if you've been sick for decades and decades and decades. John says the body never stops healing. And yeah, that is always true. And every single participant, every single patient always feels so much better by the end of this very short 2-week program. So basically you just hang out with the McDougall team online. It's basically like a 2-week party. You learn a ton. This is not sponsored in any way, shape, or form, but it's just an amazing way for people to get well if they need that added support, like professional medical support. But I've had the absolute pleasure of sitting in on lots of them. So I've seen a lot of them. And I will say John is, you know that he is kind, but the kindness really shines through when he's actually with his patients. Like he gives them so much. He is just so real with us. And what I really appreciate is that I've always noticed if there is somebody with a cancer diagnosis in the group, you see his tone completely change and he gets really serious. He looks concerned, but he always says, okay, I'm going to send you these articles. So he's going to send you articles based on your specific situation. He's going to ask you to read those articles and then reach out to him. So he'll give you his direct email address and he might even hop on a call with you. But I loved how specific he was and how targeted his message was to each individual patient, especially those who needed him the most. So of course, there's their amazing medical director, Dr. Anthony Lim, who I absolutely love. I love this guy. But John, I just thought that was always so wonderful. Once I was at a in-person event before the pandemic. And I remember sitting and having lunch with this couple, and the man, he was a camera person. And so he was hired many years ago to actually shoot and film some McDougall lectures. And he was telling the table about like how he said something like almost everybody, like 95, 98% of people who he shoots, as soon as that camera goes off, they're a different person. And he said, John, he's like, Dr. McDougall has never changed. He's like just the same kind, gentle man that you see on camera. Now, again, some people don't see like a gentle man. They see an aggressive man. I see that as his passion. And if he's ever offended anybody, like I just know that's just not his intention. And sometimes we kind of need to get offended to snap out of our own selves and our own kind of hole that we've dug for ourselves. And sometimes that works on people. I know it doesn't work on everybody, but it was nice to hear this man kind of like verify that, yeah, John is who he is. And I got to say, like, he's shown so much grace and understanding. And the very end, this is so sad, but he, at the very end, our last email exchange was actually really, really sad, but my mother-in-law was very, very sick. This year has been so difficult, but this year her very late stage cancer just kind of took over. And we can never really know, like, what was the actual culprit? I've got my theories. I never want to share them because there's just no point. But at the very end, he reached out to me because he knew what was going on with her, and he offered his help. And we were in a stage of complete chaos, our family. We were terrified. That was a moment where we were kind of like in denial. Everything was getting really real. We didn't want to believe that it was getting that real. And he reached out and he offered his help. So I wrote him a freaking dissertation. And I'm like, okay, these are all the meds that she's taking. These are the hospital stays. This is what this specialist said and that specialist and blah, 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 blah. And now when I reread that note, I can see like, yeah, we're coming to an end here. We're in an active stage of the close of her earthly life. And what he responded back with was practical advice. He gave me practical advice to relieve her pain. He sent me a study that showed, the possible solution. And that study was really not just for me, but for us to share with all of the physicians and the caretakers at that time. But then he brought me into reality and told me that the most important thing is to minimize her pain right now and start preparing for hospice. And had we taken his advice and prepared for hospice at that time, things would have gone smoother than they had. So I was blown away by his message. And I remember receiving that. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like he is just such a healer. This is just what he does. This is why people love him so much, because he just freely gives so much information. And although we're not supposed to give medical advice, like the dude just did that so often. But of course it's up to us. And his followers are actually intelligent. He told me that once. He's like, this is a steep learning curve, learning all this stuff about human nutrition and food and calories and these like numbers and all these concepts. And human nutrition is very complex. So he's like, this is a steep learning curve. And so the people who come to the McDougall program, the people who read his books, the people who learn are actually really, really intelligent folks. So yeah, just know that you're a really smart cookie. Adrian, it's nice to see you. Potatoes are so versatile. They sure are. They sure are. We can do so much with them. And we don't have to cool them in the fridge and increase their resistant starch content. We can. I do that anyway because I like to batch cook sweet potatoes, and I'm not going to eat like an entire bag in one day. So that's what I do. But that's that. So a couple of other comments. Betty wrote in saying, I'm waiting for the plant-based community to recognize this man for the fight he fought and all his contributions to nourish and heal our bodies. Nourish and heal our bodies. And that's exactly what we are empowered to do today, because largely the teachings of many people, but again, my favorite plant-based doctor is John, always was, because he's the most entertaining one by far for me personally. And then Cheryl says we need to keep his message alive. And I totally agree. But instead of waiting, we need to take that into our own hands and do what we can do. Anything is better than nothing. And so my commitment is to take you through his books. Yes, I'm going to do a series. I know his favorite book was The Starch Solution. So there's lots of tagged pages here that we can go through. However, that's not what I'm going to go through first. First, we're going to go through this guy, the McDougall program for maximum weight loss. And he used to always say, like, he's not a weight loss doctor. Don't talk to me about that stuff. It's about getting healthy, not about losing weight. But when we lose weight, we can get healthier. So the two kind of go hand in hand. And so because selfishly, there are lots of people in my circle, in my network, who are very confused about weight loss, we are going to hold another fasting circle. I am going to open up this group. So we're going to kick it off to all of you badasses who really want to jumpstart and really want to kind of like trigger things like increasing our satiety hormones and things like that. Just so many things happen in a fasting state. So we're going to do a DIY fasting mimicking diet second weekend of August. So if you're interested, then just like ping me in the comments or send me an email, hello@plant52.com. Let me know you're interested. The way that people join our groups, our live groups, is they purchase the menu, or you can purchase the course, take yourself through it, but you can also take yourself through it forever and ever and ever, twice a year, once a month, but you can also join us. So doing it in a group is just so much more fun. It will increase the chances that you actually stay in the fast for the full 5 days. And my favorite part is I want to handhold you in breaking your fast, because that's the most important part. It's all important, but breaking your fast is really important. Following that, though, we are going to follow the principles of the Maximum Weight Loss Program by the McDougall team. So I've largely learned from John himself, from this book, of course, but also from Jeff Novick, who is their nutritionist and just my favorite dietitian, because, man, that guy simplifies things. He's hilarious. Maybe there's a theme here. I like to be entertained. So do you. But there's so many nuggets of gold that we will learn. And I'm going to ask all of the participants to experiment, to notate, become your own scientists of your own healthcare and wellness. And we will soon start to see the weight drop off. And it's really not about anything superficial, because everybody really is beautiful in their own way. But sometimes it's hard to see the full beauty, because there's a lot of extra padding that's kind of like getting in the way. So when I see people kind of like shed weight, you really start seeing them. And sometimes I think we need that reminder ourselves. We need to see ourselves and remind ourselves, like, oh, dang, yeah, I am actually quite beautiful. And it changes everything. It changes everything. But again, it's not really about beauty or anything like that, although that's, of course, a fun component of this whole journey. It's about feeling awesome. It's about feeling like crap to then feeling awesome. And yes, it's going to be hard work, not impossible, but it's just so worth it. Okay. I can sit here and give you 100 different reasons. Literally, I can give you 100 reasons as to why somebody may benefit from doing this. But if you don't want to fast, if that's way too extreme, or if you can't do it for whatever reason, you can just join us. So every week, I'm going to start Mondays again at 9 a.m. Pacific time. We will be here on a weekly basis, and we will learn. We will learn and be led by Dr. John McDougall. We will carry on his message. We absolutely will continue to talk about the potato in a good way, because the potato is our magic pill. My favorite book actually is the McDougall Program for a Woman. I got this in a used bookstore, and I love the color. I love the cover. I love this book. I love how he dedicated it to his wife and his daughter. I think at this point, maybe only Heather was born. That's their firstborn. But it's remarkable. And this book is a celebration of a woman and of the of the human body in the female form. And so I love this dang book. It does talk about all the chronic diseases and all the rest, but it gave me a very good understanding of our bodies. Also, he says that if you're healthy, menopause should not be a pain in the butt. So good news there. Maximum weight loss. This is the maximum weight loss program. I'm going to do things my own way, so I'm not going to be as strict. But some of you will want to be strict, and just remember that it's really only for a temporary period of time. So maybe you're going to adopt all of these maximum weight loss rules and tips and guidelines for like the next 3 months or the next 6 months. Take it to the holidays, take it to the holidays if there's a lot to drop. And some of you have literally said, I've got 60 pounds to drop. Others will tell me about 20 to 30 pounds. It's still significant, right? We just have to remember it's slow and steady. Slow and steady wins the race. The reason why we are called Plant 52 is because when we plant better habits and just take it 1 week at a time, after a year, after 52 times of doing this, everything can change. So it's all about taking it slow and steady. It's not about like an overnight change because that's impossible, right? So yeah, we're going to look at this, and then we will look at the starch solution. And in every single book, there's always some sort of mind-blowing learning and integration about human health, about nutrition, about our bodies, about life, about nature. John has this amazing way of shining light on nature, our earth, just nature in general. And it's so inspiring and it's so beautiful. Like it's really like touching. It's quite poetic. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you. Yeah. So anyway, that is that. My call to action for you is to come back every Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific time and join us as we learn. Somebody else wrote something about my interpretation and understanding of John's work. And even though I find that there's so many people who've read all of the books, who've been following him for years, when I actually have a conversation with them and we're talking about different concepts, they will often say, I never thought of it that way. So maybe it's because of the added exposure that I've had to John. Maybe it's all of those lecture slides that I've helped him with. Whatever it is, I think it is something that is of value, and so something that I'm going to share with you. I will end on this note, and that is that I just feel really grateful and honored to have been in his presence. I've only met him in person twice, but there have been enough Zoom calls and plenty of emails and a lot of just like me observing him and just getting to know him in different ways. And he was just like such a cutie, He was so adorable. And sometimes when we would get like really down to the wire and we are emailing each other back and forth, like he was just really, really cute. And I won't say he was like my grandpa. It's almost like more like my dad because he's my dad's age. But it was just so fun working with someone who was like, older. And I always thought like, oh my gosh, if my dad could work like this, I would be blown away. I would just be blown away. Like if John McDougall were my dad, I would be so proud of him. Man, what a badass. A lot of people are asking about his passing and about autopsies, and some people are demanding to know how he passed away. And when you hear something like that, it's kind of heartbreaking. Of course, we understand. They want to know. We're naturally curious. But if you are in that camp, I think maybe you have forgotten that John McDougall is a real man and he has a real family. And so that stuff is just none of our business. He has shared so much and he's given us so much. So for us to say and almost demand that we know something so personal about him is really effed up. So I think sometimes we just need to check ourselves. But man, he was an extraordinary human. I told you in my last live, when I first got his first email, it just kind of like hit me like a ton of bricks because the energetic force was so strong. And that's how I felt when I was there, like in real life at the McDougall program in Santa Rosa, California. When you were around him and his team, they really all just vibrate on a different level. I went into that program, and now that I know what it feels like to be in a fasting state, freaking amazing. When I went to their program and ate their food and I was just around them, I felt like that same element of being in the fasting state. You seriously vibrate at a different level and you feel very connected, very open, very optimistic, powerful also. Like you just kind of have this drive that you can like accomplish anything in life. And you have this optimism that's just not always there. So yeah, it's that whole team, it's his entire family. Maybe it's because of the way they eat. I don't know. But yeah, it's just been amazing. So my contribution going on. We will learn. We will continue to learn. We are going to start with this starting next week. There will be new videos. I will do some cooking. I will show how I apply maximum weight loss rules to our life. It's pretty basic, but it works all the time. So with that, I wish you an excellent day, and we will see you next time.